The Secret Code of the Freemasons of Sydney, Episode 1. Sydney, like so many other major cities, has a wealth of secrets that appear to be placed right in front of the public's view. They have been placed there by an organisation called the Freemasons. You may ask how I know this. The reason I know this is because I am a Freemason, and I have had the privilege of reaching the two highest positions to be obtained in a Freemason's lodge. I am going to share with you the knowledge that has been passed down through the generations of Freemasons. I have obtained this information by travelling to various locations around the world, and will include the hidden secrets that these countries have to offer. In order that the public can see these secrets, they have placed markers in front of them. This was to illustrate their position. One of the most important markers of the Freemasons is the obelisk. Upon the obelisk, they have encoded a message. This message will help them to obtain light. Light is the main object of attainment in any Freemason's lodge. To the Freemasons, light is knowledge. I have been lucky enough to have been trained to be an electrician, and to understand the principles of how this invisible energy is transformed into light. During the course of these films, I hope to show you how the knowledge of this form of energy, which we call electricity, has come into our possession. In order to do justice to the wealth of information that abounds within the realms of Freemasonry, I have created 4 episodes of approximate equal length. It is my intention to indicate what message that each episode intends to relay, and then reiterate at the end of the episode the knowledge gained. During the course of these films, we will discover that the Freemasons have been aware of an energy grid that encompasses the earth. We will learn that they have placed all of their important temples and monuments upon these energy grid lines, and have highlighted their position by placing their marker, the obelisk, in close proximity. I have chosen to call the film The Secret Code of the Freemasons of Sydney because many of my Masonic friends that go to lodge with me here in Sydney have been instrumental in sharing with me the Masonic knowledge that they have acquired, and like me, wish that this knowledge is not lost forever. To understand the secret code of the Freemasons, we must first become acquainted with their knowledge of symbols. This first episode will highlight some of the more important symbols of the Freemasons. It is not my intention to offend anyone with the images and statements made in this set of films. However, on my first night in the lodge room, when I was given my first cloak, I was taught to not fear anything Masonic. Since that first evening, when I was instructed on how to discover what is the truth through obtaining light, I have made it my Masonic mission to understand the meaning behind each of their symbols. What will become clear is that there are certain themes that constantly crop up. These themes are placed there to focus the mind on the message. An example is this image displayed in St Jude's Church in Randwick, Sydney. The image shows an apple tree with an abundance of fruit. In its centre is the sun. At the bottom of the tree is the continuation of the letters I.S.I.S. The apple and the sun are both common symbols in Freemasonry. However, the theme I.S.I.S. is the pointer to Masonic knowledge. The letters I.S.I.S. represents the Egyptian goddess Isis, who through an immaculate conception produced a child called Horus, whose symbol is the all-seeing eye. The theme of the Immaculate Conception is taken up by two other major religious organisations. The first is Buddhism, where the Buddha was first conceived through an Immaculate Conception. The second is Christianity, where Jesus was also acknowledged to be conceived by an Immaculate Conception. I don't know of anyone who believes for 1 minute that Isis was able to have the infant child Horus through an Immaculate Conception. And yet nearly 2/3 of the known world have come to accept that their faith is modelled on the theme of the Immaculate Conception. Could there be another version of the theme? One that lies behind the story of Isis and her child Horus. I will show why the Freemasons have placed the Egyptian goddess Isis and her child Horus with his symbol the all-seeing eye so predominantly within their circle of knowledge. At the Masonic temple in Mosman, on the northern beaches of Sydney, the letters Isis are displayed all around the borders to the entrance. This is to tell the Mason he is entering the temple of Isis. The letters are sometimes placed upside down, as in this case on the right-hand side of the doorway. This is to tell the Mason, as he walks upon the pavement on his way out of this particular temple at Mosman, that he is now leaving the temple of Isis. The theme Isis will crop up everywhere in this set of films. It will become evident that somewhere within the image or story is the real message of Freemasonry. The story of death and rebirth can be illustrated by the letters ISIS being placed in certain phrases. The letters Isis are placed all along the internal walkway of the Masonic Church of St James on the edge of Hyde Park, Sydney. While standing at the end of the walkway, your eyes are drawn to the concept of the Immaculate Conception, which is displayed within the mosaic window. The Church of St James was one of the first churches to be built by the Freemasons in Sydney. It is known as the Church of the Shell. Before we can begin to understand the message behind each of the Freemason symbols, we are required to remove the veil that has covered our eyes and kept us in the dark. The veil has been placed over objects that have a deep significance to the Freemasons, such as this veil which is placed over the vase. Or we may see the veil placed upon the headstone of the Freemason's grave. All of the secrets of the Freemasons are usually hidden behind the veil. As this illustration shows, where an angel is shown initiating this priest with the black and white veil. The veil that hides the Freemasons' secrets became in turn the Freemasons' cloak, which is another one of their symbols. The cloak of the Freemasons has many different colours, the purest of which is white. In order that the secrets of the Masons could be passed down through the generations, they have associated the white cloak with the initiation ceremony. The Freemasons have then shown Jesus wearing this white cloak as he proceeds through his own initiation ceremony. This image shows Jesus being presented by his mother to the high priests of the temple. They are all situated on the black and white tessellated pavement, while Joseph, his instructor, holds the deacon's wand. Jesus is also shown receiving his white cloak after being initiated or baptized by the Master, John. After his initiation, he will be presented with his white cloak by these two angels waiting to one side. The cloak is an important symbol of the Freemasons. It can contain various messages, such as this cloak shown upon the wall of a Masonic church, with the numbers 3, 4 and 5 displayed inside the square dice. To the general public, these numbers may not mean anything, but to the Freemason who has continued on his journey, first through 3 steps and then through 5, until he reaches 7, which is shown through adding the numbers 3 and 4. The Freemason can then apply these numbers to the study of the triangle and ultimately understand the lessons of geometry. Later, we will apply the lessons of the 3, 4 and 5 triangle and discover some of the innermost secrets of the Freemasons. Once the Mason has been given his cloak, he is then free to discover the meaning behind each of the symbols. Here are some of the main symbols of the Freemasons. The obelisk or marker, the square, which is shown in the hands of Jesus as he wears his white cloak. The compasses are also an important tool of every Mason, and so is the staff or wand. It is the measuring device the Mason uses to pinpoint the movement of the sun. It can be seen in the hands of all those people associated with Masonic knowledge, such as Abraham. Another symbol relevant to the Masons is the cross. It is shown here placed in front of the tomb, which is guarded by 2 sentries, each with his own staff. The Freemasons will place their symbols everywhere. An example is in the Church of St. James in Santiago in Spain. As the general public walks across the entrance floor, they are confronted by this array of symbols, all placed within a square border. We will notice the black and white cross in the bottom right corner. Next to the cross are the 5 noble pillars in architecture, known to the Freemasons. In the circle above them is the man, with his arms outstretched. He represents the zodiac sign Aquarius the man. To his left is the Holy Grail or chalice, whilst to his right are the 3 pillars called wisdom, beauty and strength. Above the pillars is the cross, and just above is the crown in the centre. And just above the crown in the centre is the 5-sided cross with 3 petals on each of its ends. This is one of the symbols associated with Venus. To its left is the bishop's headdress, the mitre. On either side of the shield, forming a set of balanced scales, there are 15 tassels, or 5 plus 5 plus 5. This set of numbers, 555, is of the utmost importance to the Freemasons and will help us to discover their secret code. Above the 15 tassels, holding the balanced scales together, is the Mason's mystic tie. All of these symbols are shown under the pilgrim's hat, which is shaped to resemble an elliptic circle, which is how the heavenly planets appear to travel around the sun. This Church of the Shell, called St. James in Santiago, northern Spain, is where pilgrims would come to be initiated into the secrets of the Freemasons. From here they would travel in various directions across Europe. One of their destinations would be to Edinburgh in Scotland. There they would deposit their shell in a small chapel at Roslin. The pilgrims, as they travel along the way on their journey, would stop off at various locations, which were mainly churches. There they would be taught more of the secrets of the code of the Freemasons, and more especially how the stars and planets travelled in their orbit in the universe. Hollywood created a film which replicated the journey of the early pilgrims, and they called it The Way. This church, called St. James in Santiago, is one of the largest churches in the world and attracts millions of tourists each year. Few would be able to discover its secrets if they were not Freemasons. But to those Masons who know what they are looking for, the secrets begin to reveal themselves. An example is the symbol for Horus, which is the all-seeing eye. It is placed in the centre of the building, above the altar. It can only be seen by those people who look up to the sky. It is nearly 100 feet in the air. This church is called the Church of the Shell. and the shell is displayed everywhere upon the walls of the church. The shell is one of the main symbols of the Freemasons, but the most important symbol of all is the serpent. In fact, two serpents to be precise. The serpent will be the key, which enables us to unlock the secret code of the Freemasons. I will now show you what this key begins to unlock. In reality, there is more than one key. The Freemasons wish us to know that they use two keys to discover the code. These two keys are displayed everywhere and are designed to make you think, I wonder what lies behind the doors in which they open. The Mason knows the secret to opening the door to the Temple of Knowledge. And the Freemasons wish us to know that they use Jesus to pass on this message. This is no flimsical statement. Here in one of their main Masonic churches in Sydney, originally called the Trinity Church, Jesus is shown knocking on the temple door. In his other hand is the light of wisdom, which he wishes to see enter the temple. From now on, I will let you be the judge of whether the Freemasons have used Jesus to relay their message. In order to build a Masonic temple, or any other building that would stand the test of time, the Mason would be required to use certain tools. The first tools that would be given to him are the hammer and chisel. I have acquired numerous images of Jesus being given these first working tools. Next time you go to a church, check out where Jesus is highlighted using these tools. The tools that are given to every apprentice Mason. One such image is shown in St. Mary's Cathedral in Sydney. The hammer and chisel are placed in the hands of Jesus as he is standing on the black and white floor. He is making his very own cross. His mother is holding his white cloak, whilst underneath Mary is the white lily, the symbol for the family line of the Queen of Sheba. These are all symbols that leads the Mason to finding the keys to their secret code, the two keys that Jesus is presenting to his disciples. Teach us how to decipher the Freemasons' secret code. These secrets were not originally intended for everyone. Only those people with a deep desire for knowledge would be presented with these keys. These people would be shown the way in the Masonic church called St. Thomas in North Sydney. At this church, the minds of the disciples have been shown to be opened by the placing of a third ear upon their heads. The caption underneath explains they were all filled with the Holy Spirit. To understand why the Freemasons would use churches and public buildings to relay their message, we only need to know who owned or who these buildings were designed for. The churches came under the authority of the King or Queen of the realm. The Queen of England is the head of the churches of England, The kings and queens of England once ruled over nearly half of the known world. So their churches are scattered far and wide. The Queen of England also happens to be the patron of the Grand Lodge of English Freemasons. The word patron means supporter. The Queen's father, King George VI, was the Grand Master of the English Freemasons, whilst the Queen's husband, Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, is a Freemason in the Navy Lodge of London. With the knowledge that the royal family are associated with both the Church and Freemasonry, it would seem rather odd if the messages contained in a Masonic lodge did not find their way into their churches. I have visited a great many churches in Sydney and Europe, and have found every one of them to contain stories and events spoken about in a Freemason's lodge. From the very laying of the foundation stone, which is performed in this scene by Lachlan Macquarie in St. Mary's Cathedral, whilst he is in front of the mason, who is shown wearing his apron with pride. In the same scene, the serpent is shown offering the apple, whilst it is entwined around a pair of horns. It represents the hidden mysteries that will soon be revealed to him. Above the serpent, and standing upon the horns, is the Queen of Heaven. Her arms are crossed to partly hide her secret, whilst above her head are 12 stars representing the 12 star constellations of the zodiac. The Freemasons use symbols such as the key to relay their secrets to one another. These symbols are not hidden from your view, but are sometimes shown presented in a way that alludes to a different meaning. An example is shown here, where an angel wishes to give to Jesus the gift of everlasting life, which he presents to him in the Holy Grail. When we can understand what is going on in this scene, we will be able to also taste the gift of water from the fountain of life. The Freemasons know that there is a fountain called the Fountain of Life here in Sydney. They know this because they placed it there. The Fountain of Life is placed in Hyde Park, in the centre of Sydney, upon one of the highest hills. It overlooks the surrounding area. The fountain has been designed and built in such a way as to capture a moment in time. The subject of time, to the Mason, dominates all other subjects. From first the marking of the rising sun to the midday or meridian point, and then concluding to mark the setting sun. Time is the most important commodity we have. We must use it wisely. Time has many symbols associated with it. The hourglass is but one of them. It is shown here in the hands of the Grim Reaper, the symbol for death. There is a special moment on a special day of the year when time is marked. On this special day, it is helped by the sun as it comes down to drink from the fountain of life. The exact time for the sun to come down to drink from the fountain of life is associated with the trinity of numbers 555. This trinity of numbers is so important to the Freemasons that they built the largest obelisk in the world in Washington, 555 feet and 5 inches in height. During the course of these films, we will discover that the number 555 has been incorporated into the locations of some of the most important buildings on the planet. These locations include the Vatican in Rome, where the Vatican grounds have been specifically designed to replicate the keyhole. Whilst the 2 keys that unlock its secrets have been placed at the top of the Vatican building, we will go to Greenwich in London, from where the starting point of time for each new day is marked. The Royal Observatory in Greenwich just happens to be 555 nautical miles from the Vatican. Our journey will take us to Edinburgh, where Freemasonry in the British Isles began. Edinburgh is positioned 55.5 degrees from the equator. And finally to the Great Temple in Jerusalem, built by the first Grand Master of the Freemasons, King Solomon. This temple in Jerusalem also has the numbers 555 incorporated within its location. To begin to understand why all of these locations are connected together, we must first remove the blindfold that keeps these secrets hidden from our view. The blindfold is first removed from the Mason when he joins a Freemason's lodge. He is then free to search for knowledge without any boundaries being placed upon him. Here in Sydney, the woman who represents justice is blindfolded at the law courts. This is to show her impartiality towards the defendant, as she can't see his face. The blindfold is also placed upon the head of the initiate at the original headquarters of the Freemasons at the Temple in London. The blindfolded man can also be seen in St Mary's Cathedral on the outskirts of Hyde Park in Sydney. We will start our journey of discovery of the secret code of the Freemasons of Sydney at one of the most important landmarks in the world, the Opera House. The Opera House is situated at Circular Quay. Circular Quay was the disembarkment point for all ships that arrived in Sydney. As the ships docked in Circular Quay, the captains of those vessels would walk a few steps to Customs House. Here they would declare the value of the merchandise carried by their ships, and then pay the prescribed amount of tax. Customs House was a government building, with the portrait of Queen Victoria, the head of the royal family, placed in the keystone above the entrance door. To the Freemasons, the keystone is the stone that is placed in the building to give the building its strength. It is also one of their main symbols. The royal warrant of the lion and the unicorn, and the symbols associated with the royal family of England, are displayed upon the front of the building. However, the symbol that is of most importance is placed upon the entrance floor, directly in front of the letters Isis. It is the swastika. Placed around the borders of the entrance floor are 9 swastikas. There are also 9 swastikas under the large floor mat. This gives us a total of 18 swastikas. This number is extremely important as it represents the numbers 6 plus 6 plus 6. The world's very first customs house or tax office also used the number 666 to tax the people. It was placed at Jerusalem and was built by Solomon, the King of Israel, and the first Grand Master of the Freemasons. Solomon's family line was associated with the tribe of Judah, whose symbol was the lion, the same one placed on the front of Customs House and also on the side walls of the town hall. King Solomon would place a tax on the 12 tribes of Israel. This tax took the form of 666 talents of gold. This nominal amount was to be sent by the people to the temple at Jerusalem each year. Attached to this number was a secret code. Not everyone could decipher the meaning behind this code. However, we are given a clue as to who could break the code in the book of Revelation. Here is wisdom. Let him who has an understanding understand the number of man, for his number is 666. We may wonder who had this wisdom and understanding. The Freemasons. The Freemasons of New South Wales attach numbers to each of their Masonic lodges. To the lodge called the Trinity Lodge, they have attached the number 666. The 18 swastikas placed in Customs House were not placed there randomly. The swastika was an important symbol to all ancient civilizations. It can be seen placed upon the chest of the Buddha, who stands outside the temple of N.A.S.A, which is situated near Wollongong, not far from Sydney. The swastika was also placed upon the whole wall of Christchurch Cathedral in New Zealand. It was put there by the guildsmen when they built the cathedral in 1885. The guildsmen were the equivalent of skilled working masons, experts in the craft in which they were employed. They could work with all manner of materials, as shown in this scene. An angel holds the 2 keys within a shield above their heads. These guildsmen were expert craftsmen who knew the secret code of the Freemasons. Unfortunately, Christchurch Cathedral was nearly all destroyed in the earthquakes that rocked that city in New Zealand. The 18 swastikas placed at Customs House refer to the height of the 2 pillars that King Solomon placed outside his temple in Jerusalem. The height of King Solomon's 2 pillars was 18 cubits. The secret number associated with the code is the number that represents the height of the round chapiter that sits on top of the 2 pillars. The height of these chapiters was 5 cubits. The number 5 is the number that will be associated with one of the 2 keys that unlock the secret code of the Freemasons. As previously stated, the temple that King Solomon had built in Jerusalem was to be used as a tax office. Every year, at the occasion of the Passover feast, which was celebrated on the spring equinox, the Jewish people were to travel to Jerusalem to pay their taxes. The 12 tribes were to pay to King Solomon 666 talents of gold. When we divide the number 666 by the number of tribes 12, we arrive at the number 55.5. The trinity of numbers 555 is so important to the Freemasons that it has been placed around the coffin of one of the original builders of King Solomon's temple. These numbers are placed upon the highest tracing board in a Masonic lodge. The Mason will understand why these numbers are placed there when he has discovered the mysteries of nature and science. He will then know that the coffin and the symbols for mortality can then be placed in its rightful tomb and severely guarded by 2 sentries, as this image shows that is placed in St. Mary's Cathedral in Sydney. The symbol for the royal house of the Queen of Sheba, the white lily or fleur de lis, is highlighted by being placed in front of the tomb. The Queen of Sheba plays a large part in the life of King Solomon. She also plays a large part in the stories of Freemasonry. In the later episodes, the Queen of Sheba's own palace in Axum, Ethiopia, will be the venue for another Masonic secret. It is recorded in the Bible that the Queen of Sheba wrote a love song to King Solomon. In this song, she highlighted the 2 symbols that would always be associated with her. These were the Rose of Sharon and the Lily of the Valley, which then came to be known as the Fleur de Lis or White Lily. The trinity of numbers 555 would be incorporated into the most important event to take place in Sydney each year. Just around the corner and only a few metres from Customs House was placed the original town square of Sydney. At the site that is now called Macquarie Place stands the first obelisk to be erected in Sydney. On this obelisk is recorded the distance to all the important towns that are located in New South Wales. Next to the obelisk is a fountain. It is known as the pavement. Upon the fountain is displayed a verse from the Bible, from the book of St. John. It goes like this: "Whoever drinks of this water shall thirst again, but whoever drinks of the water that I shall give to him shall never thirst." We can imagine the ordinary person in the street reading this verse and saying to themselves, "Of course I'm going to be thirsty again." To the people who understood the laws of the universe, these people would be offered water from the Holy Grail, just as Sir Galahad is being offered water from the Holy Grail by this angel in the Masonic Church of St. Bede's in Drummoyne. Above Sir Galahad is the bringer of wisdom, the serpent. The people who understood how the universe worked would truly have their thirst quenched. This image of the three wise men who followed a star to Israel shows them studying the planets that orbit the sun. It is placed in the Kirk Church on Moore Park, Sydney. John the Evangelist, the writer of this passage from the Bible, also happens to be one of the two patron saints of the Freemasons. John the Baptist is the other patron saint. Whenever an image is shown of John the Evangelist, he will always be holding the Holy Grail. Inside the Holy Grail will always be a serpent. Sometimes the serpent will have wings, just like the dragon. The clue to having your thirst quenched could be found on the verse on the pavement fountain. The designer and creator of the fountain instructed its builder to highlight the clue that would lead the seeker to having their thirst quenched. In the verse is the letter I. It is shown as follows. Later in the verse, it is shown much larger. This second I is intentionally shown much larger because it represents a large upright object to be found approximately 1 mile away. It is positioned on the edge of Hyde Park, on the corner of Elizabeth and Bathurst Streets. It is an obelisk or marker. This obelisk would have the numbers 555 incorporated into its design. This obelisk is a replica of the obelisks that can be found all over Egypt. The obelisk was to be built to the same dimensions as to those given to Moses by his God. It was to be 5 plus 5 plus 5, or 15 feet at its base. It was to be 5 times 5 times 3, or 75 feet in height. These sacred dimensions are recorded in the book of Exodus. The masons who built this obelisk using these dimensions were continuing on an age-old tradition of placing their message on structures that would stand the test of time. The Freemasons were also aware of the sacred dimensions recorded in the construction of the Great Pyramid in Cairo in Egypt. They understood that the numbers 666 played an important part in relaying the distance around the circumference of the Earth's equator. The number 666 has been incorporated into the dimensions of the pyramids. This has been achieved by adding a 0 or 0 to each 6 to make 60, and by also understanding the phrase as above so below, which literally means two of. This would mean multiplying 60 by 60 by 60 and then doubling the numbers to make 432,000. This number is placed upon monuments right across the world. The numbers that are now illustrated in this scene will be verified by the author and documentary film producer Graham Hancock, who has written many books and produced many documentaries for the Channel 4 in the UK and also the Discovery Channel. Graham Hancock has discovered that a whole series of numbers appear to be replicated all over the ancient world. One of these numbers is the number 432,000, which is displayed in this image over the pyramids. Here is Graham Hancock's YouTube site entitled An Interview on Ancient Mysteries.
So look, scientists, historians today are of the opinion that knowledge of the precession of the equinoxes is relatively recent, that we discovered this astronomical phenomenon or observation not much more than 2,000 years ago. The Rig Veda, the fundamental text of ancient India, contains 432,000 syllables. These are all numbers that relate to the precession of the equinoxes. And they reached the conclusion that the only explanation for the presence of these numbers is that, quote unquote, some almost unbelievable ancestor civilization had observed and precisely measured this astronomical process called the precession of the equinoxes, had felt that it was important for mankind to know this and had encoded it in myths and stories so that it would be passed down by storytellers generation by generation for thousands of years, as long as stories continued to be told. And it actually didn't matter whether the storyteller understood that he was relating information about precession or not. All he had to do was tell the story true, and the information would be there. And by the way, it's not only in ancient texts, but it's in ancient monuments as well. For example, the Great Pyramid, if you take its height and multiply it by 432,000, you get the exact measurement of the polar radius of the Earth. And if you measure the base perimeter of the Great Pyramid and multiply it by 432,000, you get the exact measurement of the equatorial circumference of the Earth. This cannot be a coincidence because of the scale used, 1 to 432,000. This is one of those numbers that are related in mythology and texts all over the world to the precession of the equinoxes.
By understanding how the subject of mathematics has been taught to the Freemasons, and by clearly interpreting their different symbols, we can begin to take the next steps of discovering their secret code. The next episode will lead us to taste the water that was placed in the Holy Grail.